All right, seems like we're just getting started, so I'm welcoming everybody to our Data Drives results session. I'm going to give some time for people to log in. I'm going to be in the chat while we're waiting. Let us know where you're joining us from. Give some time for people to log in. I know we're scheduled at 11 and some of the sessions are still going on, so we're going to give some folks some time. I'm going to give some folks some time just to log on into the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. Let us know what church you're representing. Excited to get this session off and going. If you guys were a part of our last session, then you know that we had some great time. So get some time for session, some of the earlier sessions to finish up. Get some time for people to join us. Let those earlier sessions finish up. But excited. But right whereas you're joining in, let us know where you're joining us from. Let me know your church, where your church is located, what you do at the church. This is going to help us as we kind of curate this community here. I'm excited, y'all. I am excited just to jump on and hear everyone in the to hear everybody in where people are coming from and to see the results. This is about results, and I am committed to getting these results. So let's already get ready for where we're joining from. Where are we joining us? Let us know where you're joining us from on today. Just give a little bit of time for people to jump on in. If you can, I'm going to be sharing my screen as well. That's just going to help us. That's going to help us just to get our it's going to help us just so us to get through some of the data in the presentation. Don't worry about taking extensive notes. Already spoke to LaKesha and she's going to be able to send this out in mass. So don't worry about taking extensive notes. Be present, write down some of the things that stick out to you. But we're going to get right into this in a few because I actually have another presentation at 12 o'clock. What's going on, Andy? I see you're from New York and the Bronx, one of the leaders. Excited to have you on. I'm telling you, if you were part of session one, we got right after it. We won't have time to get all of session one in just because we have a lot to get through. What's going on, Josh? What's going on, Pastor? So we won't be able to get through everything in session one, but we are going to get deep into data and what data means. I went deep into statistics and deep into research for this presentation, and we're going to give some folks, this is an opportunity to take down what people are saying about online ministry today, the statistics and what it's looking like as we go back into the church. LaKesha, how are you doing? Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Have a presentation to be making at 12, so I'm going to have to log off at 11:55. So we're going to put in as much, and we're going to go in on drive. We're going to hit the drive button. Give people about 2 minutes to get back in. But as you're joining us, let us know where you're joining us from, what church, what you do. As you know, this is about networking as well, and there's a networking button there onto your left of your screen. This is about networking as well. This isn't about what I do well or what our church does well, but picking up what other people are doing well, what your church might be doing well that I can learn from, we can glean, and we can utilize, and that's how we grow in kingdom. So excited. All right, Scotland AME Zion is in the house. All right. 31st Street in the Baptist in the house in Richmond. Josh is my guy. Shout out to Pastor Mitchell. All right. So let's get, I'm telling you, there's so much to get. There's so much to glean on this session that I want to jump right into this and talk and get after about the nitty gritty, what folks are saying about statistics, what folks are saying about the numbers, because it's going to help us. Please talk in the chat, ask questions in the chat. I'm going to do my best to go back and forth. I'm going to be sharing my screen, so I'm going to be primarily in PowerPoint, but I will be coming back. So feel free to ask those questions, and we're going to get after it. So we're right here at 11:02, so let's jump right into this. The theme today, data drives results. Data drives results. Everyone just talk data. Just write data right into that print. Data drives results. Data drives results. I hear all the time, and people ask me all the time, why does data matter? Isn't it just good? Isn't it just good that we have people who are hearing the message? Isn't it just good, Mark, that people are encountering the message? Yes, I'm never going to tell you that it's not good that people are hearing the message. But what I am going to say to you, if the only numbers that you are looking at is offering and how many people attended your service, you are not taking it. You're not doing analytics, and you're not taking advantage of data. If the only things you're looking at is how many people attended your worship service and how many people gave in your offering, you are not, I repeat, you are not doing analytics. So I want to start right in this. Data is important for these reasons: introspection, impact, and inadequacies. The first thing about introspection is numbers will always let you know where your reach is, how far your reach is, and who you're reaching. A lot of the times in content, especially when we're delivering a message, the message that we're delivering is the gospel, no matter how we put it, whether it's packaged in women ministry, men ministry, dance ministry, music ministry, the message that we're delivering is the gospel. Now, you need to also realize that there are hundreds of other churches that are also delivering the same message. So you need to realize how far your reach is. I'm going to tell you this, and it's going to be a hard truth. Most ministry fail because they fail to realize their actual reach. I know that sounds tough, and I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but most ministries fail because they fail to recognize their reach. You need to know your proper reach. Is it local? Is it regional? Is it national? And is it global? And the reason why that's important is because it allows you to tailor your message to your specific audience. One of the things we realized at Alfred Street when I first came on board is we thought we were a national church, or a regional, right on the regional national. And we knew people were hearing about us. We knew people were watching us online. But what we did not know is how many people were watching us globally. People in South Africa. We had people in South Africa. We had people in United Kingdom. We had people in Canada. And what we realized was, maybe our reach is bigger than what we intended, which means our message needs to cater to not only what is happening in the United States, but now we need to be cognizant that there are people who are looking for our message throughout the world. And that's important because what you talk about in your message is what people are going to be watching. That's why they're going to be watching. What are they watching for? So I challenge every single person to have an honest conversation with their ministry and ask themselves the question, what is our reach? It's good to have a growth plan and a growth mindset. Just because you are a local ministry doesn't mean you can't talk on national matters. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, if you are talking about national matters, if your message is national, then your message has to be local and regional as well, because you're missing a community of people that are interested in hearing your message. And it goes straight to your impact. That's why numbers matter, because numbers will tell you how effective your ministry is and can be. You need to work to move away. I said this in our last session, and I hope people didn't feel offended by this. I said this in our last session. You need to move away from strictly the double tap. Ministry begins to work, and you begin to see the fruit of your ministry when you move away from simple double tap messages. Again, I said this the first time, if the only data point that you're looking at is how many people are watching, how many people are giving. You're missing it. And also online, on online content, if you're only looking for how many people liked your message, you're also missing it. Because liking your message doesn't mean people have actually engaged with your content. It strictly means they saw your content. But when you want to move from people seeing your content to engaging, it's almost as if people who passed by your church were walking. They saw the structure, they seen the edifice, they know what it looks like, but they never actually engaged. They came to church, they came to church, sat the message, never engaged, never went through membership, never came down that aisle. When you move online from the double tap, that's why polls are so important. That's why content engagement, asking people what they think, is so important, because you're moving from just people who like your post to people who are engaging with your post. And the last but not least, why numbers matter, and then we're going to get into some specific numbers. This is hardcore data, and this is the truth about the church writ large, is inadequacies. What we say all the time here at the Alpha Street Baptist Church, what we say is that live worship covered a multitude of sins. Online, that is not the case. Every note that is missed will be heard. everything that can go wrong is seen. If the lighting is off, if the cameraman misses or moves, all of that is seen, because we're looking at a screen and we're not in a live experience. Numbers don't lie. They don't always tell the truth, but they certainly aren't lying. So let's get into some hardcore truths that I want us to really engage with, and I want us to be challenged by. I want you to be challenged by these statistics. Here we go. In 2020, the Barna Group conducted a study about the state of the church. Large research institution did a study on the state of the church during online ministry. These are the facts of where we are as a church in 2020. Now we're in 21, but this is where we were at. Barna Group conducted a study, found out 48% of church adults expressed that they did not watch a church service in the last month. We could stop right there and have an entire conversation. 48% of churched adults, not unchurched, 48% of church adults expressed they didn't watch a church service in the last month. 32% of practicing Christians, practicing Christians, these are people who would attend at least one service a month in person. So they're considered practice or practicing Christians. 32% of those have not watched an online service, period. Not this last month. Since the pandemic, 32% of practicing Christians didn't watch an online service. I want you to sit with this, because I'm gonna call us out as a church, writ large, call us out as a church. 32% of practicing Christians, those who would come at least once every month, so folks who are, you see them here and there, those folks, 32% haven't even watched a church service. Now, here's what's interesting about this, and here's what is troubling about this. 48%, let's just say 50% of church folk haven't watched the service in the last month. 32%, those who come one every month, haven't watched it at all since the pandemic. But the interesting fact that we're seeing is that churches are saying, 40% of churches are saying that they had an increase in online worship. 48% of church folk aren't watching church, yet pastors are reporting that there's a 40% increase in online viewership, which means, as a church, here's the takeaway for us: we're failing in evangelism. We are not preaching to the saved. We are preaching to people who are church hopping virtually. That is where the numbers are coming from. We're getting an increase in viewership, but it's not an increase in evangelism. It's literally, we are in the age of worship free agency. That's where we're at. We're in worship free agency. People are now picking and choosing the churches they want to attend. They're picking and choosing the communities they want to attend, but we're failing as a church virtually with with meeting the evangelistic need. We're preaching to those who are saved. That's why we're seeing there's an increase in our viewership. So I can go to this person's church because, you know, they're on the West Coast and this person's on the East Coast. So I can make 2 or 3 services. And now my numbers as a pastor is increasing, but the number is not increasing in our evangelism. The unsaved and the unchurched are not logging on to online worship experiences. That's the truth of data right now. And that's the importance of data. Because so far, we've been tooting our horns as a church, saying, I have increased in my viewership, which means I have increased in the number of people. I have increased in my giving. This is exciting. But the reality is we are not meeting the evangelistic need. New people aren't being saved. We're preaching to the saved already. That's the hardcore truth of looking at numbers. The hardcore truth of looking at numbers is that we need better content. We need better content to meet the need for folk who are unchurched. I mean, I would even argue we also need to meet the need for folks who are churched, because we're seeing that 48% of the people who are churched, practicing Christian, your members, your members are not always attending. Let's keep going. There's more to this study. It's mind-blowing where we actually are as a church. Let's keep going. I'm going to go back and forth. So forgive me if the screen looks a little weird. I just want to make sure I have a chance to monitor the chat so that I'm not missing any questions. But feel free to jump into this conversation if you have anything. We're going to let's go right back into it. The truth about online ministry. 29% of practicing Christians and 20% of non-practicing Christians say they take advantage of church's on-demand feature. So let's break this down to anyone who might be new to this. On-demand is different than live. On-demand is basically if you have a website and you have a list of sermons. If you have live stream, you have the chronicalized list, you know, Facebook page where they can go back to the post, they can go back to the video and watch it. 29% of people are saying they take advantage of that, and 20% of non-practicing Christians. I'm going to argue in this presentation that's a point to be excited about. Because just because they're missing on Sunday does not mean they're missing services, but they are going to get what they want out of the service. Meaning they may not stick around for the whole hour and a half of worship, but they are going back to listen to what they want to listen to. But we're going to get into that a little bit later. Let's keep going. 40% of church adults log on to their own church. 23% of that group admitting to watching a different church. So again, we're finding that church folk are indeed church hopping. We virtually church hopping. I'm telling you, we're in a worship free agency. People are going to the community that they want. They are going to play with Tom Brady. That's what everybody's doing at this point. Everybody's going to play with Tom Brady. They want a Super Bowl, and that's what they're going to get. They're going to look for what they want. And so I'm going to argue with you. That's not a reason of concern. It actually is a reason to celebrate, because we know that people are still interested in church, but they want a specific product. And as a church, it's our job in our community, our job and our responsibility to find out what it is that our community wants. What is it that our community wants that makes them virtually church hop? What is it about our community that makes them want to go to the other church? And how does our church virtually meet that need? Again, we can't compete with huge churches. I understand that. Budgets are different. The number of people on your staff is different. That is it. I understand that. But at the heart of it, at the core of it, what is it? We have to find out what is it about people wanting to see something else and leaving their own church. Let's keep going with these stats, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. 22% of Christians and 14% of non-Christians see online as an opportunity to invite their friends to their church. Y'all, if there was ever something for us to rejoice about in this season, is the truth that with online ministry, people are figuring out this is an opportunity. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I understand mom and dad, they live in Savannah, Georgia, and they can't come up this way because of COVID. And I believe my pastor is amazing and awesome, and I want mom and dad to hear it. This is the chance where we have the opportunity to invite friends and family. So this is the opportunity for us to take advantage of that, to network with other churches on different time zones, to have, church virtual pulpit swaps. This is the opportunity for us, for our congregations to watch each other, for us to have who have sister churches in different areas. This is the opportunity to take advantage of those types of resources that are to our advantage. And the takeaway from this that I'm going to argue, and we're going to get into this later in the presentation, the takeaway from this is that we need to diversify our programming. People like the on-demand option, and so we need to be able to give them different content that they can come to and watch once they come. They may not be coming to online worship. You might be experiencing a decline in your worship experience. That doesn't mean they're not watching per se. They may not be watching the entirety of the service, but it does mean that there's something people want that we must be able to feed. So I want to talk a little bit about this because I think this is important. People are going, this is nothing new to us. We knew data prior to the pandemic, data showed that people were willing to sacrifice their own experience to go to a church that had youth programming. We knew that as a community that youth programming was driving people, church attendance at bigger churches. So especially bigger evangelical, especially bigger Southern Baptist convention churches, the mix in the juice was, the flavor in the juice was youth programming. Had an awesome youth program, and parents were willing to sit through whatever they sat through because they knew there was programming for their children. So we always know that people have a desire for something. Even they're willing to sacrifice something if it meets a different need or a more important need, a need that's higher in their priority. And so for us as a church, I'm arguing to all of us, it's time for us to take advantage of what makes our church unique. I'm going to say this over and over in this presentation. The thing that you need to be asking yourself as a church is what makes our church unique. Not what makes it good, not what makes it special, not what makes people like our. I'm talking about why do people, or when do most visitors show up? When do people come and they have to invite their family and friends? You have to see our Easter pageant. You have to see Pastor preach about this. You have to see our community when we do this special community service giveaway. That's the juice. That's your flavor. That's the Kool-Aid. That's the flavor of your Kool-Aid that you need to be taking advantage of in this season, because that's what people's going to share. I know you don't have an opportunity to come to my church because of COVID, but watch as we do this type of community service. Is your church doing community service? Broadcast that in a way that makes people want to see. If you can do this in community service on Monday through Friday, I wonder what you do on Sunday. We have to start looking at our church. And I want to say this, and I want to tread lightly. I'm not telling us to abandon the mission, because the mission, we have the Great Commission. We have Matthew 28. We have our Great Commission. But how do we utilize the Great Commission to go there to all the worlds and, to preach the good news, teach, baptize, all of that? How do we do that in a way that caters to people's attention span so that it could minister to people's spirits? That's the end all goal, is for it to minister to your spirit. But in this day and age of technology, we first have to get their attention span, allow them to get into a space where the spirit can actually do something with them. And that's why data is important. This is why data is important. That's why I tell each and every person on our team that every single number that comes by Alfred Street is a person. It's not just a number. I'm not just looking at our numbers just so that we can boast, but I'm looking at our numbers because I believe in our message. like we had this conversation in part one where we talked about the machine behind the media. And in part one, I argued with you that the gospel has always been in competition. Since Galatians, Paul says, I'm surprised that you have gone forth in a different gospel that's really not a gospel. Ever since Christ died, the gospel's in competition. And we have to realize that if we have believed in our message so much, that means we want people to experience that message. So when I see a number and I see that ticker keep going up, I'm excited because I believe in the message. I'm not just excited because we get to say, hey, 20,000 people watched our service this weekend. No, I get to say 20,000 people had an opportunity to encounter Christ this weekend. So that's what makes it important. And now if I believe in my message so much, and I know that people are now having a problem with staying online, people are having a problem staying, or people have a problem with their attention span, my priority is how do I get you? How do I get you to stay on? How do I get you to stay a part of what's happening? I tell our AV team this all the time. I'm obsessed with when the numbers go down, because I want to know where I lost you. I'm obsessed when people log off. I'm obsessed when people tune off, because I want to know what was it about that message that made, or that part in the message that made you log off, that made you disconnect, that made you think there was something more important than what was happening in front of you. So I am obsessed with that information and our analytics. Oh, here we go. Here we go. We're going to keep going because this is going to get right into, it's going to get right into what I was just talking about where did we lose people? Because this number is gonna be hard for us to it's gonna be a little bit hard for us to digest, especially folks who are preaching in front of the camera. This is gonna be hard for us to digest. Here we go. 15% of Christians are multitasking while watching service. Y'all. 15% of Christians are multitasking while watching your service. That means while they are watching what you have to say, 15% of those folks are also on their phone. While you're preaching, 15% are also on their phone. And this shouldn't come as a surprise, because while we were in the sanctuary, we saw when people were on their phone. So we shouldn't be surprised that people are also multitasking while we're watching. And the question for us is not to be upset, is not for us to be mad, is to again ask the question, where did I lose you? Where did it become more important for you to engage with your phone than what was happening on the screen? Let's keep going, because this is when we talk about program diversification, this is going to be important. 15% of practicing Christians have joined a prayer meeting online during the pandemic, and 3% for non-practicing Christians. And this is gonna be hard for everyone to accept, because this is our second, as a church, your Sunday service is your first biggest program, and your second biggest program is either Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday night Bible study, and only 12% of practicing Christians are attending a Bible study. Only 12% are attending a Bible study, which means as a community, we need to do a better job. We need to do a better job in our programming. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm giving you an example of this. When the pandemic hit, at our pursuit, we have Tuesday night Bible study every day, followed by, we do prayer and praise service, testimony service, about 30 minutes at 6:30 to 7, 7 to 8. 7 to 8, that's when we do our Bible study, and that's followed by a 30-minute programming. When the pandemic hit, I went to Pastor and I said, it's going to be actually impossible for us to replicate Bible study, because even as a church, while we had a great attendance on Sunday morning, Bible study didn't meet the same attendance as Sunday morning service. So I went to him and I told him, I said, we have to think of a way to do Bible study differently. Bible study is the message. It's the packaging. Bible study is the message, but it's the packaging of the message that we need to change. We don't need to change Bible study, but we do need to change the presentation and the packaging. The packaging needs to feel as if it's a program that people are watching. Because if I'm on my TV, if I'm on my couch watching TV, I am not as engaged as I would be. I'm not as engaged as I would be if I was in the church service. Listen, y'all, when a person comes to church, they've made a commitment to what's in front of them. They got out of bed. They put on church clothes. They drove to your church, and they're willing to sit through the entire presentation. At home, I'm still in my pajamas, didn't have to drive, and waited in line. That's right, John, and waited in line. I didn't drive. I didn't change my clothes. I'm sitting in my couch, not on a church pew, and I'm watching you on a screen with my cable, with Hulu right on my phone, with Netflix right on my phone. All these distractions are right next to me and right next to the screen that could pop up, which makes me have to ask the question that you have to change the presentation. Y'all, I want to beg you guys to change the presentation of how we do Bible study. Don't change the content. I'm not asking you to change the content. I'm not asking you to sugarcoat. I'm not asking you to sugarcoat the gospel. My friend, my good friend, Pastor Elijah McDavid said that, a lot of these churches have good tactics, but bad theology. I'm not asking you to have bad theology. I'm asking you to have better tactic. That's all I'm asking you to do, is to get your tactic in line with your theology, so that people can actually embrace what you're saying. Get your programming in line with what you're presenting, so that people can actually consume it. So that's why we went to a model of, can I push it? Can I push it? We created Can I Push It off of that idea of, we need to change the way we present Bible study. Can I push it? At the core of it is Bible study. At the core of what we're doing is Bible study. But the presentation is different. I can sit through this because it looks different. It looks like it should be on TV. It looks like I should be watching this. And when we get into service, we may not use that same model, because it's a different method of delivery. It's not the same delivery. I'm not delivering the same message to the same people in the same way. So no, we may not have pastors sitting on a couch, with some ambient lighting. No, we may not do that, because we're in a sanctuary. There's a different level of commitment. There's a different level of investment. But at the core, we want to ask ourselves the question is, how do I present this message in a way that someone can digest it and feel comfortable without switching the channel? If 15% of people are multitasking, and I'm going to argue with you that 15% of people that are multitasking are not even the population that we need to be reaching. And that's going to come up on the next few slides. So that's it for our Barnard group. And we're going to go right into a second study. And this study is equally important as we're thinking about what it means for us to be doing online ministry. Watching TV. This is by Venture Reality Fund, right? Watching TV online. Gen X is watching TV online 54%. Millennials are watching TV online 72%. Gen Z is watching TV online 70%. That already shows you that through the online sources, there's a difference in how people are consuming product and content. Watch how that shifts and see the shift that's happening, because that means we're going to be changing the way we're doing it. Watching via cable or satellite, Gen X, 74%. Millennials, 63%, Gen Z, 55%, which means Gen Z is not sitting at always sitting at the TV watching television, which means we need to start thinking as a church of changing the approach of multimedia ministry. That means what I'd be also interested in, I'm going to actually put this note in here for us. We as a church, our biggest platform was cable and radio. We're already seeing that there's a shift from static television, cable, satellite to an online resource. So as you're coming up with your online ministry, your multimedia ministry, keep in mind that online is the wave that people are moving in. Gen X 54%, 72 for millennials, and 70 for Gen Z. That means there is about 75% of people are watching this online. So before you start thinking about making a contract with the radio station, you might want to second guess. Before you make a contract with the next cable network, you might want to reconsider, because we're seeing that there's going to be a change and a shift in how people are consuming content. And here's something that's huge. The Reality Fund, which had a bigger pool of people, found out how many people use a smartphone while watching TV. Now we found, remember, we previously said there was 15% were multitasking while watching TV. How many people are using their smartphone? Gen X, 26%, millennials, 37%, Gen Z, 47%. Listen, this day and age, everybody is distracted, which means our content needs to be on point. I'm not saying you're going to get 0% of Gen Z watching, using their phone while watching your content. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that we know our community is distracted, so we need to change our approach. If the message, faith come by hearing, if the message is one of the most important parts of our service, y'all, then we don't need to be wasting as much time doing the same things. If you doing things that we were doing in service, because it's not translating well online. People are not watching as many services, but are watching on demand, because in on demand, I could rewind and I can fast forward to get to the part that I want to hear. So we need to start thinking as a community and ask ourselves real questions about our product. It's not to say that these things of our service are not important. I'm not telling y'all that. I'm not saying that the way that the service elements are not important. What I am saying about those things is that what about those things make them important, and let's use what makes them important a part of our service instead of just replicating the same Sunday service. I want to say this with love in my heart to every pastor, to every leader at a church. With the love of my heart, I want to say this: we have to ask ourselves the questions that are tough and difficult, and to say this: what is going to get our message across? Because that's what we need to be. That needs to be the highlight. That needs to be the focus. What gets our message across? Now, as we're thinking about what gets our message across, I want to go back to something that I think is very important. I said this in part one, but I want to share how I got to that in part two today. If you were in part one, then I told you as our online minister, I made a specific. It was important for me, a decision to make the specific decision that our hub was going to be YouTube. We originally, the plan was, and I take blame for this as originally in myself. I first said to myself, you know what, let's create our own online database where people will come and they'll come to Alfred Street's page, and then we'll have all this type of content here, and there. And I realized to myself that there was a problem with that approach. And the problem with the approach was, for people who already know Alfred Street, that might not be a problem for them to download an Alfred Street app. It may not be a problem for them to go to Alfred Street to watch content, but I knew I was going to miss out on the people who didn't know about Alfred Street. And what this slide shows, and excuse me for the misspelling errors, Netflix here, what this slide shows here is that there are trusted brands that people are willing to integrate on their device or already have downloaded on their device. And what I knew was, if I can get our message on platforms that people already have, it reduces a step in for what people have to do to hear my message. So if I can get my message on YouTube and you already go to YouTube, the only thing I need for you to do at that point is subscribe to YouTube in order to hear my message. Now, subscribing to my page on YouTube is easier than getting you to download my app. I'm not saying the app is ineffective or not important, but your app is you're going to get more people from your church who download your app. And that's all right. That's not a problem. But as I've already been mentioning, we're failing on our evangelism in this season of COVID. And I knew people are already going to be on YouTube. You're going to go to YouTube because you want to know you want to know a specific recipe, or you want to buy some sneakers, or you want to get a review of some product, and you want to watch a funny content, or whatever the case is. And while you're doing that, you might find a message that says how to deal with disappointment. And then there you go, you click on that message, and then you realize, man, that message was good. And then the next time you want to know how to handle a difficult decision, you might go back to Alfred Street. That is how you make content work for you. If you're working for the content, I'm not saying that it's a bad approach, but if you're working for the content, you're going to be on overdrive constantly. There are brands that are trusted that people already have downloaded. So Spotify, how do you get your messages on Sunday morning on somebody's Spotify? How do you get it on somebody's Apple Music? How do you get it on somebody's Netflix, on somebody's Google, on somebody's Amazon, on somebody's Twitter, on somebody's YouTube, on somebody? You need to be thinking about these things. I seen somebody in the chat. On the chat, Lindsay, already saying podcast is the new radio, and audio only allows for more multitasking. That's true. How do we get our content and our product on these things that are already out there? If YouTube is already there, let YouTube work for you. YouTube's going to run for the analytics for you. Let it work for you. Facebook, let it work for you. Instagram, let it work for you. Twitter, let it work for you. And that's what we need to be thinking, is we're trying to reach. Yes, I want you to create your app, and I want you to create an app that's going to be better than YouTube and better than Facebook. I'm not saying don't do those things. What I am saying is, while you're doing those things, let those things work for you. Let what's already out there work for you, because people are already on those things. And people who don't know your church, who don't live in your area, don't even know your church exists, might be searching for one thing and just stumble upon a cross-related word, and the algorithms connect them to your church. That's why it's so important. I can't remember the name, but there was a man who did a presentation last month in our presentation, who said, as preachers, it's going to be hard to hear, but on YouTube, when you're putting up your sermons, it's actually best to do simpler titles, how to get away with depression, than a deep sermon, a deep sermon that rhymes with, the dangers of dealing with disappointment or something along those lines. But that's because you want to get the rhythms of what people type in. Go to Google, go on YouTube. That should be your sermon title. When it says how to, and just see what it comes up. That's what people in your community are looking for answers for. And as a church, if we're supposed to be a community that gives the answer, if we're supposed to be a community that speaks to the answer, let's meet the needs. Go on your Google, go on your YouTube, go on your Twitter in your region, and see what people are looking up, and see what people are discussing, because those are the answers people are looking for. Those are the things people are looking for. Let me keep going. I'm gonna go back to our presentation. Content diversification, and this is part of part one, and then we're going to get into something new in part two. Here, I told you last on our last presentation in part one, in the machine behind the media. You have three areas. You have content, community, and creativity. Your content is the message. It's the task. It's what you want people to consume and take out of it. But content is void. I know content is king, but if content falls on deaf ears and doesn't go anywhere, the content doesn't mean anything. I'm not saying that the message doesn't mean anything, but I'm saying nobody's hearing it. If nobody's hearing it, what's the point? The community, the people you're trying to reach. And that's why it's so important to look at the numbers, because the numbers are telling you who to reach, who you're trying to reach, where you're trying to go, the local, the regional, national, global, whatever the case is. You need content for your community. And I'll argue with you this all the time. Every single time I do a presentation on online ministry, you've heard it said that anointing is the difference. Online ministry, creativity is the difference. If everything is online, what makes your content worth my time? We already see here that people are distracted. We are already seeing here that people are losing their time. 42% of church folk didn't watch a service in the last month. That already tells you that people are distracted, or people don't have the same motivation or the same level of investment. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do I get you invested in what I'm saying and what I'm doing? And I'm going to argue with you repeatedly, is that creativity is the difference. Y'all, we have 8 minutes before I have to log off here. So I want to say this. I'm going to go through this quickly, that in this season of online ministry, one of the most important people in your ministry are going to be creatives. No, I didn't say the minister. No, I didn't say the preacher. No, I didn't say the person. No, I didn't say the person that has. No, I didn't say the person that has everything to say. But what I'm arguing with you all, and I want you to hear this deeply, that in this season, we need to start thinking of creatives. And I know somebody's going to say, give me Bible. Well, I'm glad to give you some Bible today. I'm glad to give you some Bible today, because it's important to rethink our commitment in this season. What we're doing is something we've never done before. If you're a preacher, if you're a pastor, you know, in Exodus 36, there is a season and there's space where God invites the people of Israel. God invites the people of Israel to a season where they are instructed to build the tabernacle. And what God says to those people, to Moses, is that I've anointed Bezalel and Aholiab. Bezalel and Aholiab, he says they are skilled artisans, designer in fine craft. And what God is telling Moses, I have creatives. I have people anointed for this specific role and assignment. And what that does for Moses, it frees up Moses's time as the leader, because Moses isn't finding a way how to mix and match and how to edit and do this and that. Moses has relied on the people that God has anointed in this season. I want you to think about bringing on creatives. They may not have an MDiv, but I'm telling you, creatives in this season are going to help elevate your ministry. They're going to help broadcast your ministry in this season more and further along than you think. Thinking outside of the box. Creatives, people who are anointed, the Bezalels and the Aholiabs of your congregation, who God has anointed for this specific season of their life. The question you need to be asking folk on your staff is, are you anointed for this specific role? Think about it. God doesn't say I want priests. God doesn't say I want the Levites to do this tabernacle. No, God says I instructed people who are skilled in this craft. So it's not about how many people you have. It's about the right people that you have. It's not about how many people that are building or help building your online ministry. It's about having the right people who are help building the online ministry. So the question you need to ask yourselves in this season is to do a tough examination, and to ask myself and to ask ourselves, do we have the right people over this specific task? I'm not questioning, are you anointed? The question is, are you anointed? Is the person who's working on your AV, on your ministry team, anointed for this specific role? Everybody has a role in building the house of God, even if they're not on the construction site, even if you're not building the actual online ministry. If you're behind a camera, you have a role. If you're an online ministry, just because you're not in front of the camera doesn't mean you don't have a role. Honor all of the creatives in this season and have some very difficult conversations with your church. Do we need to reevaluate our team? Do we need to look at our team inventory? Does this make sense for us virtually now? Do some people need a bigger responsibility because of the virtual demand? The questions we need to think about is, how are we communicating this message so that this church will continue to live on far beyond this age? Get ministry that it has better quality. That's why I argued in our first post. That's how I argued in our first post and first presentation, that we need folk. We need folk that I'm telling you that are anointed for this specific task. That it's hard. I know it's hard. What I'm saying is hard to digest, but I'm challenging churches to think creatively, thinking of creating positions that didn't exist before, about bringing on people who may not have an MDiv, but maybe on a for contracting people out, roles out for creatives. Let your message be shown in a way that allows your ministry to excel despite what you have to, despite all the things. I know you need new technology. You might think you need new technology. You might think you need, I would argue with you. I would go to bat on this, that it's not just about getting the finest technology, but it's about getting the right approach. It's not just about getting the finest technology. It's the right approach. It's the right content. Y'all, like I mentioned, y'all, I have a presentation right at 12. And so I want to give some space. If there are any questions, let's chat about those right now. If there are any questions, feel free to put them on the chat right now. If you have any questions, I do have another presentation right at 12. But if you have any questions, suggestions, you have a personal question for your church and your ministry, write that in the chat right now as we're beginning to close. And so here we go. I want to let everybody know that here's a new thing. Here's a concept for us to accept and digest. Here's a concept: accept and digest. Just because you are the pastor, you are the director, you are the ED, the executive director, you are the CEO, does not mean you should be the only person that is in front of the screen and camera every time. Say that again. I'm going to say that again. Just because you are the pastor, senior leader, just because you are the CEO does not mean you should be in front of the camera every time. And why is that? There are people with personality. There are people who can engage this audience in this community in a way that will surprise you. And that adds to your content diversification. If you're going to be the person that's preaching every Sunday and teaching every Bible study in a format, why not give someone else an opportunity that might cater to a specific audience, that might bring a different audience to your group? Are y'all getting that? That was one of the reasons why. When I went up to pastor, we had to think of a community. We had to think of a message, and we say, well, Dr. Judy's a brilliant teacher. People love to hear how she teaches. Why not give her a program? Because just because you're the pastor doesn't mean you have to be the only person in front of the camera. So we conceptualized OTOG. Because we wanted to make sure that audience was being met. And then hear me on this. Hear me on this. I want to tell you, the numbers don't have to be the same for the same program because there's a different audience. Just because I had to realize this early on Can I Push It and OTOG, we weren't making the same numbers. And so I was thinking, oh man, are we missing the mark? Until I realized there are some people that watch OTOG that never watch Can I Push It. And there are some people that watch Can I Push It that never watch OTOG. So what I started realizing to myself is that I even started noticing it in the chat. And so what I started noticing and what I started asking myself was, maybe we're reaching more people. Maybe it's 2,000 here and 1,500 here, but maybe altogether it's 3,500. So I'm allowing myself to think differently about how many people are actually engaging with us, because they're engaging with us differently. I see different people comment on OTOG that I don't see comment on Can I Push It, which lets me know we're reaching a different audience at times, because people are coming with different things. So just because you're the senior leader does not mean you need to do things all by yourself. I'm gonna try to get to some of these questions. I see, Lindsay, you said, how do you feel about the advertising side of using YouTube? Okay, ooh, okay. So let me say this. There is a place in YouTube where you can get monetization. You can monetize your content. I want to say be intentional about the type of advertising that shows up on your page, but also be intentional about how your community feels about it. There is a space to let YouTube really, we said, let content work for you. There's a space where you can get money off of the content that you're preaching, off the content that you're using. Be careful about copyright infringement if you're using music, because YouTube will pull that right off and you won't get any money from it. But be careful about how you're thinking about advertising. It's a tough. I can't say one or, but I'll say I can't say one thing or another. But what I would say is be intentional about where you use it. If it shows up on, does it show up on sermons? Does it show up on Bible studies? I don't, and how many times it shows up. I get annoyed when I'm listening to a sermon and I'm just in the shower listening to a sermon, and then then the sermon, then it gets blocked off. So be intentional about what type of content it comes up on. I want to tell this. I'll speak this out to everybody. I said this before, that before the pandemic, one of the biggest reasons people were church hopping or going to different churches was because of youth programming. And I don't think that has changed. Youth programming, creatives, youth programming is important. Shout out to our youth minister, Reverend Barbara Floorville, for the content that they do and keeping people in touch. They have a cooking show. They have the regular Zoom content. They have the regular Zoom content. There's one for each level for our kids in our middle school and our high schoolers. So there's content for each and every grade. Think of those things, because those things will keep you engaged. Parents want their kids to be engaged spiritually as well. What specific creatives might you suggest? I'm creating those who are great with social media interface. Social media in this time is probably more important than your actual website, though your website needs to be a good landing ground for people to follow up. But I'm going to say social media gurus, people who read, live, and breathe social media content. And I will argue marketing, those who have a marketing sense and a marketing background, those type of creatives will help go a long way. They'll allow you to re-envision what will look good. People who can say, hey, pastor, let's give you let's give you a show for IGTV that's only a minute a week. That's what you got to commit to. Or let's give your sermon clips, the best of your sermon clips, and go back. I would say social media gurus will help you and bless you in this season. I see another question that says, have you any success with small groups or consistent cell groups online in this season? We have. Let me say something about cell groups and online groups. We did cell groups of e-groups prior to the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, we had e-villages, and we had about 12 e-villages that I was in charge of. And we had e-villages from all around the community. I said this in my last presentation. You need a space for people to chat about that writ large. And so what we did was we opened up a private Facebook group, not for all of Alfred Street. If you live in the DMV, you can't be in this group. This is for people who live outside. This is for people who live outside of the DMV, outside of the country. And that's their space where they can actually come back and just talk about it in a larger group. But then we have smaller groups where they come back and talk about the sermon. I would say about small group, what's important that you create clusters. Find out what type of person is coming to your small group, because a small group is a level of investment. Remember I said move from the double tap? If somebody's attending a small group, that's a different level of investment. Create clusters, specific clusters. So you might have a small group online for single mothers. You might have a small group online for those who are grieving. You might have a small group online. Create those clusters, because there's also a personal level attachment. Oh, I'm not just going to talk about the sermon or talk about our church. I'm going to talk to someone who actually knows what I'm going through.